Hey everyone, Dan here. Before we get into it, if you enjoy these videos, please hit the like and subscribe button. It helps a lot. And also keep in mind that these are my own thoughts, opinions, and ideas. These are not meant to be, nor should you take them as investment or trading advice in any way, shape, or form. Do your own due diligence, put in the work for yourself, and make your decisions based on that. Enjoy. All right, folks, here we are after market close on Wednesday, September 29th. We're going to take our daily look at SoFi. So SoFi had some news today that was not received well by the markets, as I'm sure you know at this point. But I wanted to cover a few things. First, I want to talk about this daily chart because I was tweeting about it earlier today, sort of in real time. And I want to talk about just sort of as folks are looking to dissect any daily or intraday price action, talk through what happened today and what I would look at. And then we're going to go take a look at the news and sort of try to piece some puzzle pieces together. And then we'll come back to the daily and just see where on the daily chart, which is the one that we've mostly been focused on, where this leaves us in the vast scheme of things as it pertains to the chart at least. So anyway, we've talked for several days about this slingshot effect that SoFi has. It starts strongly in one direction and then goes strongly in the other direction. We see this here yesterday, came down and then slingshotted back up. The day before came down strongly, strong move back up. This one definitely less so. So this isn't a flawless pattern, but we do see this frequently, right? Slingshot down, strong recovery back up. This one definitely an outlier, right? Consistently up, 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 up. And definitely news catalysts can throw these things into disarray. And that could have certainly been the case today. So knowing that there was a strong news catalyst, that sort of sitting in the background, I think it's worth sort of keeping that in mind because, like I said, you don't know exactly how it's going to skew the price action. And what we saw today was basically a full recovery of this rundown. And what I was looking at that I did tweet at some point was this pre-market high of 1722. And those are very, very important targets for intraday price action. As it approaches those or as it's able to overtake those pre-market highs or lows, it can be very, very impactful to the price action. And so that was something that was important to me and obviously rejected off of there. But what we saw it do is come down and try to catch itself on the VWAP. But that was very short-lived because then it came up and bumped its head on 1687 support resistance zone that we had put in and just completely lost it. Lost that and then basically did this thing. This looks to me like a movie scene where like someone is falling out of a window and they're trying to catch themselves with one hand and then you see their fingertips just slowly losing grip, and then they fall down. And that's basically what happened here with SoFi today, and then tried to catch itself on this 1629 support level, just kept batting itself around there. And this to me looked like a pretty obvious bull trap because we saw a series of higher lows here, and then it was flattening out and making a series of lower highs by this point, and wasn't able to hold any strong volume over these over this support and resistance zone of 1629. The volume up here got either very thin, which you see right here, or the sell volume just very, very quickly picked up. Like this is decent volume right at the breach point that gave it some strength to get up and over, but then that buy volume quickly died down and shifted to red, right, as it just flatlined, and then the red volume picked up and was just able to bring it down pretty quickly back to that point. So the sell volume just seemed to be winning out and it wasn't making any clear movements above these previous price points, and so to me it looked like it was just gonna kind of fall off into close, which it did. I just mentioned that because somebody had tweeted to me around like this area, I think, is this a bull or a bear trap? Which, you know, good thing to identify when these traps are coming in, and I had just mentioned to him, you know, it looks like a bull trap to me, but that's why. And so now we see it sort of continuing into the after hours, right? Continuing to roll down a little bit. And I think part of this can also sort of be a sign of how, I don't even want to say sort of how sketched out or how sketchy SoFi traders feel at this point. I think another strong factor that we shouldn't discount is that there were a lot of folks that just a few weeks ago were very, very red and were very sort of despondent in very bad places because of the states at which their accounts had been put in by SoFi, or I guess maybe a better reflection of that is they had put their accounts in because of SoFi, and then they had turned green, and definitely there were folks taking profit and sort of locking in some things at that point. At least I hope so. I definitely had some folks send me messages that they were, and I wouldn't discount the idea that people are pretty quick to pull that trigger these days when they see their green kind of dwindling or getting very, very close to that break-even point again, and just sort of saying like, I'm not going to go through this again. I'll wait it out and see what happens, and just sort of jumping ship at that point. I didn't make any changes today, but I'm not holding an incredibly significant amount of my portfolio in SoFi at this point. So, but I wouldn't discount the idea that that could be a part of what happened here. Folks just saying like, I can't go back through this again. I can't let this go into the 15s or, whatever it is that they had in their mind. And so they just sort of pulled the trigger, which to me is definitely understandable. But that's the price action for the day as I see it anyway. And we'll come over to the daily here briefly, but let's first talk about the news. So this is from SoFi Investor Relations sites, and I'm not going to read through this. I'm just going to pull out the piece that I'm going to focus on. But 750 million aggregate principal amounts of convertible senior notes due 2026. So I'm sure you know this, but here's what I'm looking at. So I have 3 tweets pulled up here. I want to go through those tweets to give those folks credits. But first, let me just point out what they tweeted. So here's what these 3 fine folks sent to me as tweets today. Here's a Business Wire article from March of 2021, and SoFi plans to contribute 750 million in capital. SoFi's press release today: 750 million aggregate principal amount. Yahoo. This looks like a copy paste in some direction or the other, but Yahoo. SoFi plans to contribute 750 million in capital and pursue its national digital business plan. This was March 13th. Okay, so we have March 9th, March 13th. This was actually the first one that was tweeted at me. The Motley Fool. SoFi plans to contribute 750 million of its own capital to get the bank ready for rapid national expansion. March 9th, 2021. So these are the fine folks who tweeted these things at me. I really appreciate it. So just, have a look at these folks or pop on Twitter if you're there and just say thank you. We have Preston Scott, MO1. We have True Tom Foolery. The buffering thing always cracks me up. And then we have Worm, aka Lester Murphy, who this person is a real, he's tweeted at me before. I think he's a very, very strong SoFi bull, longer term investor. I think I'm recalling that correctly. But, somebody who's just very, very fanatic about SoFi, or at least SoFi stock, it seems. So hopefully I'm characterizing those things correctly. But the obvious through thread here, that number is an exact match to what we saw today. And then in addition, we have our LinkedIn's here, which I won't pull up again because it's just going over old info. But we have 3 prominent people on LinkedIn putting that they have roles that are SoFi Bank in parentheses information. So SoFi Bank information, sorry, for 3 prominent folks on LinkedIn. We have this offering today, 750 million aggregate principal. And then we have the old news, but the very relevant news, and good on those folks who said, wait a minute, 750 million sounds very, very familiar. Why? Well, that's why. So, to me, this sort of screams and shouts, dominoes all lining up to be toppled over to the finish line that is bank charter approval. So this could just be part of the process. I know nothing about the bank charter approval process, so take this with that huge grain of salt. But I could see, in a logical sense, the idea that regulators and approvers are looking for things such as like put your leadership in place and name them. Okay, and then we see some folks on LinkedIn start to put these things there very publicly. I don't know that they have to put it publicly, but it is. And then we see, and then maybe the regulators are like, okay, so in your filings and the documents that we've laid out to sort of go through this approval process, the number that we've been looking for that will make this happen is $750 million. Okay, let's do whatever you guys need to do to lock in this $750 million. And so SoFi says, okay, so here's how we're going to obtain that $750 million. And then today we get that news coming out. So these things just seem possible to me, that it is just the checklist, right? They're going through the checklist, and that would obviously signal that these are these are potentially kind of hard to undo things, or at least really, really bad optics to undo any of these things, if it weren't kind of just check these boxes in your bank charter's approved territory. That's, like I said, pure speculation. I know nothing about the bank charter approval process, but this is just me trying to extrapolate and link together some info, and that's where my head is at the moment. So, like I said, take it with a huge grain of salt because I know nothing, but but this is just me sharing my ideas. Back to the chart. So we see sell volume increasing today, obviously coming in 37.6 million almost, and but sort of like on pace still with this green day. This green day was a little light. This green day was much heavier. A little bit lighter, but pretty darn close. So to me, the volume is still looking okay. As long as the buy volume starts to pick back up to the same degree as we were seeing it in this kind of run up here. Now, there's sort of two things that I'm looking at on the daily at this point. One is obviously that there's this gap here that could come down and get filled. Okay, so keeping an eye on that, and if it does, then what happens? The other reality is if it does come down and fill that gap, if we just extend out this upper trend line, it's still going to be above this upper trend line, right? So if it's following this overall upward direction that we saw at this point in time, I know nobody wants to be back in this price point territory, but I think it's worth just sort of saying, okay, if it needs to come down and fill this gap, or if it's just, super bent on coming down to fill this gap, and we have to play the hand that we're dealt with the market or the stocks market that we're given, it may just be bent on doing that. So that brings it down to what? Probably 1534, 1530, 1525, somewhere around there, just to sufficiently fill that gap. Then the question is, does it drag it down even further just because of perceived bearish momentum taking over, because of additional bad perceptions of down catalysts? Who knows? But the reality is it's going to catch it most likely. If it came down to fill this gap after this trend line was above that gap, that would seem very, very unlikely to me. Because if that did happen, that would be around October 14th, October 15th, something like that. And so I don't think that if it came down that it would do that in like 2 weeks or 3 weeks. I would expect it to come down in the next few days, or at least the next week, and then sort of start maneuvering from there. Now, if that means it starts maneuvering sideways or up or down, we'll have to take a look at it at that point. But this is just to say, keep in mind sort of where we are in the longer trajectory of things. We had this big sell-off, we had this big gap down from earnings, and then we've had a retracement back up. And now, as part of that retracement back up, we had a gap up. We may be coming down to fill that gap. And then we have opportunity for the trend line, the previous trend line up, which still is on the chart, right, to catch us again and continue to lead us up. Now the question is, can we then come up and make some higher highs as a part of that, retransition into bullish movement? I don't know. Do we lose that trend line and move down further? Like I said, we're gonna have to see what happens at that point in time. Folks always want to crystal ball things, and I always just say, I put in the puzzle pieces where I see them, and but I need to see what it's doing when it hits those particular puzzle pieces. And I don't know exactly what it's going to do. I just think it's an important inflection point, if you will. So that's what I'm looking at on the daily. So this is sort of the support zone that I'm looking at, if you will. Now, if folks get really jazzed, or if news comes out very, very soon about the bank charter, also if folks start to sort of get in the swing of like run up toward earnings, I don't know that it would happen this far out, but if they do, then potentially we swing up prior to that. But I think it would take something pretty significant for it to want to bump itself up strongly at this point. If we flip over to the weekly, I did want to take a look at the weekly. I can't exactly remember why. Yeah, I mean, there's a couple of interesting things coming into play here. This could be seen as sort of like a bit of a cup and now a handle. And if so, on the weekly, this could be signaling a pretty strong move up. That said, you could have mistaken this for a cup that was starting to grow a handle at that point. Though I think the incentive around that would have been that this high had clearly fallen short of this previous high, and that there was clear catalysts at play, namely the lockup ending that was going to bring a lot of selling pressure in, and that this wasn't necessarily going to follow the chart at that point for chart or technical reasons. And we've been dealing with a lot of that with SoFi. That it's not necessarily always following the chart for technical reasons, but these catalysts have thrown it pretty wildly, as we saw here, as we saw here, and as we saw here, right? Even just an analyst projection, an analyst catalyst coming in, making huge moves in the stock. So it could be one of those that gets into, I mean, this is probably going to sound a bit hyperbolic, but gets a little bit into like Tesla-ish territory, or maybe even sort of like Virgin Space, because I was thinking of the ticker symbol SPCE, where it's super catalyst driven and super news cycle focused and heavy, and it gets very bullish and meme stockish over periods of time, and then something happens and it can really fall off very, very quickly and hard and heavy on a seemingly negative catalyst. So I don't know. It's a young stock. It's a fresh ticker. We'll have to see. It's still sort of creating its personality and its profile, I think, but it's something to certainly consider, I think, as we've seen these pretty aggressive movements based off of these kind of like just normal catalysts, right? Lockup periods and analysts' grades come in. Earnings reactions happen, and the fact that those have all been sort of pretty significant in size, like the reactiveness of the market to those things, I mean, could be a sign that this is the personality that SoFi and the market is sort of leaning into or creating. But just a consideration that we'll have to see. But I'm really excited to see what happens when the bank charter is announced, to be honest. I certainly don't know that this means that it's true or slam dunk or what have you, and I'm sure they would not say so, but just trying to follow sort of the trail of data that is left for us and piece some things together. And really, like I said before, truly, I mean this though, really appreciate the folks on Twitter who actually do the hard work and notice these things and then tweet it at me. And I'm sure there's folks on all edges of the internet who have done these things. And I, like I've said before, I'm very busy. I get pulled away and I get very, very deeply sunk into work, for most of the day. And pulled away for family things and stuff like that. So I'm often honestly kind of out of the loop. And so folks sending things definitely means a lot, and I'm happy to share it here. And that of course also means that sometimes I miss news factors and things like that. And that's why I rely more heavily on the charts typically. But if we have a ticker that is just super super intent on going hot and heavy with different catalysts up and down, then it'll be territory that I try to just kind of stay out of, to be honest, because like I said, I'm just not a big news and catalyst type of trader. But like I've said before, I'm in SoFi and I was in IPOE because I think it's an interesting predicament that the stock and that the symbol is in, and so it's just interesting for me to cover. All right, somehow I turned this into over 20 minutes, so if you're still watching, I appreciate it. I hope that rant, or at least the info that you got earlier, was interesting in some way, shape, or form. Feel free to leave your thoughts and comments below. Definitely appreciate that as well. Okay, folks, I hope you had a good trading day and that you're able to finish the week off strong in the days ahead. I appreciate you watching, and I will see you in the next video.